Okay, as you can see, I have spent time using my Sharpie to trace all of my pencil lines. I did not use my Sharpie to color any spaces in. Everything is open like we would have on a coloring page. But the last thing I need to do before I color is to get rid of all these tiny little pencil lines that get in the way. Alright, so I'm gonna go little bit by little bit. If I do this, I could fold or rip my paper. But if I go a little bit at a time and focus on one thing at a time, like I'm doing my tree, and notice when I'm erasing, especially near the edges, I'm not actually rubbing back and forth. I'm pushing and lifting my eraser up. It's a little bit easier than rubbing back and forth because when I rub back, it could fold my paper. So I'm actually just pushing the eraser right here. So I'm going to go ahead and erase the rest of my pencil lines, and then we'll get started coloring. Before I color the bus in, I'm just going to color on the back to make sure that's the color I want. That way I don't find out when I'm coloring on the picture I worked so hard on that, oh, I actually don't like that color very much. But I like this yellow, so I'm going to color the bus in yellow. I'm actually going to leave the windows white and the door white. So it looks a little more like glass. Now as I'm coloring, see I'm actually going along the edge here, coloring back and forth. I'm not scribbling over the windows or over the door. I'm going around those things. And I'm going back a couple times, back and forth, until I've got a nice, even coating of color. If I do this, it's not going to look very nice. I would have rushed, and it also doesn't really look like I took my time. And I can still see plenty of the white paper. When I color, I want to make sure I don't see any more of the white paper. I want to see the yellow for the school bus. I'm also pressing down a little bit harder so the color shows up nice and bright. If I go really light, you don't see the color as much. But if I press down a little bit and go back and forth, I can see it a lot better. I might leave that little center circle I made white, just to give it some contrast. But notice as I'm coloring in a circle. Like I'm making part of a circle. I'm curving my pencil around and around. I'm not going like this because that's not the shape I'm coloring. I'm coloring a circle, so I'm going to make circles with my pencil. Makes it look a little bit nicer. Now if I really want it to look a little more like glass, I might add a couple of diagonal lines. So it looks a little more like shiny glass. Might even do it on the doorway too. Yeah, looks nice. Alright, now we all know a stop sign is red. I'm going to go ahead and color my stop sign in. Now because this is Sharpie and it's super bright, I can actually color on top of the words and I'll still be able to see them just fine. Now that doesn't mean that we should cover our windows with the same color. Just like we did with the bus, color around your windows. If you want to make your windows a different color, that's totally fine. But don't make them the same color as your building because it just doesn't look very nice. It doesn't look very complete. So I'm going to add black, but I'm going to color really lightly so it looks more like a gray. Alright, so let's start on one of the buildings. Now for the buildings, you can make them any color you want. Now I might want to make this building green. That sounds like a fun color. Yeah. And if you weren't sure if the green is what you wanted, again, flip your paper over, test it on the back. Now I've got to be really careful around these little spots because there's a lot going on. Now these bushes might be green, so I'd have to think about that, and maybe I shouldn't have added green building. I should have thought about that a little bit more before I decided to color my building in. But we can come up with a solution for that. So this isn't taking me 2 seconds to color. It's taking me a little while because I'm pressing, I'm going back and forth a couple of times in small sections. I'm also going against the edges a little bit, which kind of helps with the coloring so it doesn't go outside the lines. I'm also changing directions. Another thing you can do is actually turn your paper, because it's most easy to color like this. So if I turn my paper as I color, it'll be a lot more comfortable. Rather than twisting your hand all over the place, I can just turn my paper all over the place. Okay, now I skipped ahead a little bit, but you can see I actually left a couple areas blank because I thought it might be interesting, instead of just making this giant building one color, that I add another color to make it more interesting. So let's do this purple. Alright, so I'm making a little purple stripe here. Now if you don't have a light color in your box, you can mix a darker color with white. We'll just use a blue for this. Alright, so let's say I have a blue, but I wanted it to be a lighter blue. So I'm going to color with the blue, and then I'm going to take my white and color on top. Kind of makes it a little creamier, a little bit lighter, more like the sky maybe. And this is the original blue, what the blue actually looked like. So you can see the difference. But instead of pushing that hard, I colored lighter, like that. And then I added the white and pressed hard. Maybe little circles and stuff like that. And it starts to look a lot lighter and creamier. Right? So maybe I'll do that for my door. I'll do a light blue for the door, and I'll do that color mixing, since I know it looks nice. I'm still coloring all over, even though I'm pressing lightly this time. Now you could leave it like that if you wanted to just press lightly, but I like my color to look nice and solid, so I'm going to take that white and really kind of rub it up and down to make it look nice and strong. Now that kind of goes back to what I'm going to do with those bushes, because I use the green. If you can't find a light green, some of you actually have light green in your boxes like this, and that'll work just fine because we'll be able to see the green separately from the green of the building. But let's say you don't. It might be a slightly different kind of light green, but I could do a light green. Now, to get a lime green like this, instead of adding white, I'm going to add yellow. When I add yellow, I'm going to get a brighter kind of minty, not minty, like grass green. And you can see it's very similar in color. All I did was I mixed the green and the yellow. I could leave my buildings white, my windows white, or I could add a color to it. Maybe I want it to look like there's a light on in the building, so I could have yellow in the windows. And if I made a curtain or something like this, I don't want to color the curtains in that same color. I might do the curtains in a different, like a purple pink color, like this. We're going to fast forward a little bit here. Okay, so you can see I've gotten a little bit further in here, and I have a lot of big spaces left. Now I have a lot of friends who say they're finished at this point. Color their buildings in. Some of them don't even bother to color their windows in. And like I said, I left some of the glass windows open here, but I made sure that the buildings here had different colored windows just so it would look a little nicer. I'm in the middle of coloring my tree right now, and if you notice, I used the brown for these branches, and I'm just coloring along the side of it because my branches aren't actually black. So I'm just kind of making them a little thicker and adding some brown so it looks a little more realistic. I'm fast forwarding, but remember to take your time. The clouds, I might want to keep white because the clouds are white. Or you could make them a lighter version of blue if you really wanted to color them in as well. And I'm going to use light blue to color my sky. Now I don't have to use light blue. I could make this a sunset and do several colors in the background. And I would start down here with yellow, blend it into orange, and then blend it into red, and maybe a little purple. But because I used so many of those colors in my buildings, I'm going to do blue for the sky. And again, this is a really big section. So instead of just scribbling all over the place, I'm starting along the edges of my objects. Coloring back and forth until I get a nice solid color. And then once I get the borders of things, like here, I would stay coloring in the same direction. So I'm going up and down. So I'm going to keep going up and down all along this section. So it looks nice and even, nice and solid. Same thing over here. And I'm going section by section. I'm not going to do like the borders of every single thing before I color the rest of the sections in. I might just do like this section right here. Color it in a little bit. And just do the edges in this area before I move on to a different section. And I'm going to do this all over. Now I can still see some white lines, so I'm going to go back with my pencil and kind of color over that a little bit more. So it's nice and solid now. So I'm going to do that for the rest of the sky. And then the same thing for the road down here. Now I do have black wheels, so that is going to be a little tricky, but maybe when I color my road, I could color my road a little bit lighter, because roads aren't always super black, they're kind of gray. And again, you can turn your paper if you want. You'll notice I'm not scribbling up and down a lot. I'm going little section by little section. I'm going right up against my objects, and I'm coloring around my objects so I get a nice even coat of color. Okay. You can see that I'm almost finished. I'm just coloring around my clouds now. I'm not actually having to color my clouds white because I'm coloring the sky in blue. You see I'm using curly lines curving around each part of my cloud instead of using straight lines. I'm following the shape that the cloud has. Don't forget that this is a video and I can fast forward, but you should take your time.